On this week's Political Figure episode, we've got what you'd get if Robin Williams had based his look for Mrs. Doubtfire on Martha Stewart, and the second best reason for a constitutional amendment barring anybody named Michelle with Bach as part of their last name holding public office, Michelle Fischbach. Michelle Fischbach was born November 3rd, 1965 in Woodbury, Minnesota. After high school, she started attending the College of St. Benedict and St. Joseph before transferring to St. Cloud State. We have a lot of stuff named after saints in this state. Graduating in 1989 with a bachelor's in political science and econ, two things she seems to have absolutely no grasp of whatsoever. She interned for Senator Rudy Boschwitz for a while before being the first woman elected to the Paynesville City Council. Paynesville is one of those geographic anomalies where I feel like it takes you a couple hours to get there no matter where you're coming from, and then when you get there you're like, why did I come here again? I'm pretty sure it even takes a couple hours for the people who live in Paynesville to get to Paynesville. Anyway, Paynesville isn't much of a city, so I can't imagine there was much to do on the city council there. So 2 years later, when there was a special election held for a vacant seat on the Minnesota State Senate, she decided to run for that and won. She was then re-elected a few months later in the 1996 general election and would continue to serve in that position for another 2 decades. Then in 2011, when Republicans gained a state Senate majority for the first time in modern history, they elected Michelle as Minnesota's first female president of the Senate. She lost that title when they lost their majority in 2013, and then when they regained their majority in 2016, they gave the fish back her title as president. Then in 2017, when Al Franken stepped down from the Senate, Governor Mark Dayton appointed his lieutenant governor, Tina Smith, to fill his position. As a result, the Minnesota State Constitution dictated that Michelle, being the president of the Senate, had to fill the lieutenant governor position. Fischbach then did something fishy where she tried hanging on to her state Senate seat while being lieutenant governor, primarily because she did not want to give up her voting power in the state Senate as Republicans held a thin majority. But a bunch of people were like, yeah, that's not gonna fly, and after she fought it for a little while, she eventually conceded, stepped down, and was sworn in as lieutenant governor in May of 2018. She then ran as lieutenant governor on the ticket of former Minnesota State Governor Tim Pawlenty, who was trying to make a comeback and be current Minnesota State Governor again. However, Pawlenty and Fischbach didn't make it past their own party primary, and our current governor, Tim Walz, ended up winning the general election, effectively ending her reign as lieutenant governor. Newly unemployed, Michelle announced her candidacy to run for U.S. Congress against Collin Peterson in Minnesota's 7th District. This was the 2020 election, so lots of exciting stuff going on that particular year. Now, Minnesota's 7th is the western part of the state. It's very rural and primarily agricultural, and Collin Peterson had represented this district for a long time. He had a lot of years of very pro-agricultural legislation under his belt and was chairman of the House Agricultural Committee, which gave him a lot of power to affect agricultural policy on the national level. It goes without saying he had a lot of policy wins and experience that really resonated with that district for a lot of years. Michelle, on the other hand, with her cushy upbringing in a suburb of the Twin Cities, had no fucking idea what types of policies were effective for agriculture, or really anything at all about agriculture. In fact, when she was asked what a bushel of soybeans was selling for, which is one of our state's biggest cash crops, we produce more of them than anybody else. If you are doing anything in the agricultural sphere in Minnesota, you have an idea of what soybeans cost. And she's like, oh, sorry, I didn't check this morning, I couldn't say. And they're like, well, why don't you give us just a ballpark? She's like, I can't do that right now. I don't deal in soybeans, and I'm not running for political office in a district that almost exclusively represents farmers. And even I know that $10 a bushel would probably be a pretty safe ballpark. However, back in 2020, it was probably a couple dollars lower than that because Trump had completely devastated grain markets by losing his easy-to-win trade war with China. When she was asked about the dairy provisions of the 2018 Farm Bill, she said she was a big supporter of them, not realizing that her opponent, Collin Peterson, had written them. And when asked what changes she'd like to make to the next Farm Bill, she said she was still talking to farmers to figure that out. Well, Collin Peterson went into detail on his policy proposals he was already working on. By this point, it was pretty clear that an original thought has never entered Michelle's head, and she had no policy to run on. So when asked what her greatest strength would be if she was elected, she said, and I quote, I will be in Trump's ear. Which honestly seems appropriate because like an ear mite, she's pretty parasitic. But the flavor aid approach was apparently the right one. I guess all it took was a combination of xenophobia and free farmer handouts to get those welfare queens to abandon voting on policy and start treating the election like it was Jonestown Idol. She won, Trump lost, and she has been utterly useless, accomplishing pretty much nothing for her district. She's basically just spent all of her time defending Trump's treason, voting against certifying the election in Arizona and Pennsylvania, voting against Trump's Second impeachment. She's voted against every economic policy she's had a chance to vote on. She's voted for sending a bunch more money to Israel. She voted against the Defense Authorization Act of 2022 because it would have made women register for selective service. She voted to defund the office of the vice president, which is a weird thing to do and just goes to show you how absolutely useless and time-wasting these representatives are. She's anti-women's healthcare rights, of course. She was one of 28 Republicans to join the Northern Border Caucus, which is a real thing you probably haven't heard of because it's stupid. It's basically a bunch of idiots who are jealous that, like, Greg Abbott's getting to have all the fun making up problems that don't exist about the southern border. They're like, hey, we should all get together up in the northern states and pretend we're doing something to keep all the illegal Canucks out. I don't know. They claim it's to combat drug and human trafficking. Their goal is probably just to keep poor people from getting affordable pharmaceuticals so people keep dying when they can't get their insulin. Watching poor people die is like their favorite hobby. I guess all I'm saying is, good job, Minnesota 7th. You really reeled in a gem with this Fischbach. Like, here's the thing. Like, I was never a big fan of Colin Peterson. He was a lowercase d Democrat. He was basically a Republican. But he was a dino with a big D that he swung around Washington, and he used it for the benefit of his district. I have never seen a rural representative that represented their district that well. He was conservative in all the right places that matter to rural Americans. Like, dude had an A+ rating from the NRA, and he's a fucking Democrat. He was pen to paper, hands-on all of the policies that affected the agricultural economy. He was in favor of opening up rural Minnesota early during COVID. He voted against banning flavored tobacco products. He was one of the only Democrats who voted against impeaching Trump. I was not a fan, but he knew Minnesota 7th. He knew his constituents, and he represented them to a T. And he knew what his job entailed and how to fucking do it. And y'all traded that in for something with the intelligence, personality, and competency of a goldfish Bach and a Karen wig? What is wrong with y'all? Good news, though. She's up for re-election this year, which means y'all have a golden opportunity to elect something less stupid. And we just want to tell you all good luck. We're all counting on you. And we just want to tell you all good luck. We're all counting on you. And we just want to tell you all good luck. We're all counting on you.